All right, guys, I got this EJ207 and this 6-speed trans in my shop. This is how I'm storing it right now. I've got these tires and a piece of board and basically this like little mat that I use. It's kind of like a oil resistant mat material. It's got about 1 inch of foam pad on it. So basically that's what I've got for the engine and trans right now. But I gotta tell you, this ain't gonna be ideal. I need to get something a little bit better for this engine. I need to get something that raises it up maybe, something that has some dollies on it and some wheels on it. I don't know what you guys do, but I gotta figure out a better solution. So I'm gonna go to Harbor Freight, see if I can find something that will lift this engine. This is my little SubaruONLY shop. It's a DIY Subaru channel. It's a channel where all I do is Subaru builds and race Subaru vehicles and motorsport events. It's a DIY themed channel where I walk you guys through the steps to get your Subarus back on the road and hopefully do a little racing of your own. So thanks for checking out the video, guys. I really appreciate it. I've got a pretty good idea of how much this engine tranny weighs. Basically, this engine probably weighs about 300 pounds fully dressed like this. And this tranny probably weighs about 150 to 200 pounds. So I'm probably looking at about 500 pounds max for this engine and tranny setup together. So that's my kind of weight threshold that I need to be thinking about when I pick up something to hold this engine and tranny. And I think Harbor Freight probably is gonna be the best bet to pick up those items. All right, guys, and this is what I came up with. I went through Harbor Freight and I looked through all the aisles, all the different options. They had a couple different options. They actually had a motorcycle lift that was a lot bigger, that was a lot more expensive. But I went with this little thing. This is actually kind of a multi-use dolly that has those front little wheels, kind of a furniture dolly, multi-use dolly. And this little dolly right here, I got from Harbor Freight for 69 bucks. And the next option up would have been about $250 and then $500. So this was basically the cheapest option I can get from Harbor Freight, and it actually had the load-bearing specs that I needed. This little Harbor Freight dolly had a load range of about 500 pounds. And like I said earlier in the video, I'm pretty sure this engine tranny combo isn't much more than about 500 pounds. And that little dolly is rated for 500 pounds. They probably give a little bit of a conservative rating on that. It probably can take at least 10% or 15% more than that rating. And in addition to that, I actually upgraded those front wheels. This little dolly came with plastic little wheels, and I actually upgraded those plastic wheels with metal wheels that have rubber windings over them or have a rubber sleeve over them. So those front wheels will add a little bit more strength to the overall rating for this dolly as well. So I'm not worried about the rating, and I've already tested this sucker out, and it definitely works just fine. So the 500-pound rating is just fine. This little sucker rolls around. The front wheels are pivoting on little casters, so I can pivot around on the front wheels. The rear wheels have a little bit of squish in them, but I just pumped them up all the way. I think the wheels have a rating of about 30 PSI, and I probably pumped them up to about 34 PSI. They're little inner tube wheels. I think the rating for the weight on each of those wheels is about 200 pounds each, or about 180 pounds each. So they're kind of close to their threshold max limit as well. If I need to in the future, I can actually replace those little wheels with solid rubber wheels. Get rid of the inner tube with the air in it and go solid rubber. Solid rubber wheels will be able to take way more weight, like twice as much or 3 times as much weight as those little inner tube tires. So that's an option in the future. But for right now, this is basically working. I'll give you guys a little close up what I did. Basically, every dolly has like a little metal plate on the bottom that you kind of use to lift things, right? That's the first thing I did is I actually cut that metal plate off and I actually reinstalled the metal plate that I cut off the front in the back as kind of a support brace. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. There you can see the front little lip that I cut off right there. I basically just left it up about 1.5 inches to give it a little brace for the little wood piece that I have in there. And I used that little heavy duty steel plate. And if you can see right there, I've repurposed it on the other side of the dolly. And I've just bolted it through those little tubes, and it's actually acting as a support brace, which also helps bear the load from the transmission. Next thing I added was this little piece of wood. This is just a 5/8 piece of plywood. And on top of that, I have a little leftover scrap piece of particle board right here that's about 1 inch thick. And then on top of that, I actually have a little heavy duty rubber little piece that I super glued down. And even though I super glued it down with some adhesive, it's still kind of coming up because of the weight of the engine. And yeah, guys, it's not ideal to be having an engine sit on an oil pan. I'm actually gonna replace this oil pan with a newer style oil pan, so I'm not worried about this oil pan. And there was a little bit denting in it already from the palletized shipping that it was in originally. So this oil pan was already a little bit damaged. And if you add a little bit of padding like I have this like rubber padding right here, I think that helps protect these oil pans. And I've actually seen that you can actually support the weight of the engine with the oil pan if you have some kind of padding underneath it. You don't want to have it on solid concrete or rocks or metal. But if you have some kind of rubber, heavy duty, solid rubber padding underneath it, usually that's fine not to damage or dent that oil pan. But ideally, you'd actually want to build some kind of bracing that would come up here to the engine mounts. And that's actually probably something I'm going to do for a little DIY project in the future, because it would be much better if I could actually have this whole engine on the front half supported by these engine mounts and not have the oil pan touching anything at all, because then I could actually swap out the oil pan if I needed to too. That'd be awesome. But as we have it right now, this is really nice and convenient because I can actually remove all the exhaust system. I can remove all the heat shielding. I can remove the headers, the up pipe. Everything is accessible and not being supported by the weight of the engine. So it's easy to remove the full exhaust system. And as you guys saw from the front, the whole front of the engine is accessible as well. So I can do the timing belt service. I can swap out any accessory components, do any of the other engine prep work I need on the front of this engine really easily. And I can actually roll my little stool over and have a nice little seated position while I work on the engine, which is really, really nice. Let me show you exactly where I'm bracing it. So the front spot, like you already saw, was the oil pan, and about the distance from the oil pan to the trans brace, which is where I have it supported right here, is about 36 inches, 34 to 36 inches. That gives you a good idea of the overall length you need if you're gonna build some kind of adapter to hold your engine and your transmission. And then the transmission mount is right here at kind of the midway point of the transmission. And since that's where the load bearing point on the transmission is, that's where I'm gonna transmit that load bearing point down to my brace right here. So that's exactly where I put a little raised little wood section right there. And again, with that little rubber section on the top to give it a little bit of grip and to give it a little bit of cushion. So that's where I'm supporting this. I'm basically supporting the rear half of the transmission right here, which is a little bit lighter than the engine. And that's why I have it on these smaller wheels, these smaller little metal tires or wheels. And then the engine itself is actually supported by the bigger tires right by the oil pan. But ideally, I'm gonna build something so I can actually support the front of the engine by these engine mounts. One other thing I'll mention is it actually has wheel locks on it in the front too, so I can lock this thing in place, and then I can unlock it, and then I can roll this engine around in my shop and move it wherever I need it to make it easier to work on or easier to store, which makes this little engine and tranny stand really, really functional for me. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up there for today. Thanks so much for checking out this video. I hope you got something good out of this video, and maybe you'll use some of this information to build something cool for your engine tranny setup. Thanks a lot for checking out the video, guys. I really appreciate it. My name's Luke. You guys are watching the SubaruONLY channel. Until next time, guys, later.